Well, first of all, thank you very much for coming today. I know that Sunday 9 a.m. is like a difficult time, so I am really impressed. I understand that this is like a good indicator of how resilient are teachers in this room, so thank you. I would like to introduce today a little bit like the main highlights about PISA 2015. Maybe most of you already know about PISA, but I would like to explain what is PISA, what we do, also trying to understand how these kind of assessments can be useful and for what purpose. So I would like to start with a little introduction. So in PISA 2015, we look into different educational systems around the world. Concurrently, 72 countries and economies have participated in PISA 2015. We assessed not only science, mathematics, and reading, but also other competencies like collaborative problem solving and financial literacy. So all the reports, the first report was published last December 2016, and in the last months we were keep publishing some volumes, paying specific attention to some of the competencies like financial literacy, for example. That was the last one that was published in May. So basically the key issues, what we want to do with this kind of assessment is trying to identify if educational systems, schools, teachers are nurturing specific scientific competencies in the students. We want to see if we are preparing adequately the students for the future jobs. So the main emphasis here is trying to understand if the students are well prepared for an international context. If we can help them to find a job in the future, if they are really prepared. So basically, can schools and teachers make a difference in what the students are learning and how they can contribute to the international context, to the world? In PISA 2015, over 500,000 of students that were representing 28 million 15-year-old students in 72 countries and economies took an international agreed test of 2 hours. So one of the important things to understand what we are measuring here is like we are not measuring only if the students can reproduce the knowledge that they are learning in the schools, but also how the students can extrapolate this knowledge, how the students can creatively apply this knowledge to the real life situation. So it's something probably different, but it's also why this approach is innovative, and this is why we can try to provide evidence and data from a different point of view. The test was in total like 390 minutes of assessment, and the students respond to questions not only about the cognitive skills, not only math, reading, science, and collaborative problem solving and financial literacy, but also about their personal background, about their schools, about their learning environment. And one of the important things here is like one of the interests that we have is involve everyone in the assessment. This is why we also ask parents, we also ask teachers, principals, school leaders. One of the interesting things in this kind of assessment is the concept of triangulation. So basically, the way that the OECD works is we work directly with the governments of all participating countries and economies. So participating countries and economies, they send their representatives to what we call the PISA Governing Board. So in Paris, we have several meetings a year just to decide what are the agenda, what is important for the countries, what we need to assess. Once we agree this point with the representative for the participating countries in PISA, we go and we identify experts around the world to do the work. So basically, we work with external international contractors, what we call the international consortium. So basically, we have like a technical advisory group, like experts from academia, professors, and we also work with expertise around the world, not only in academia, but also in companies, in organizations that can provide the expertise and the knowledge to try to develop, try to reach the objectives that the countries have around the world. So everyone needs to be involved to do this work. This is how it looks, the map. So basically here we have the gray countries are the OECD member countries, and in blue we have the rest of the participating countries in PISA 2015. So here, if we want, because basically what we want to do is just trying to learn from the experience of other educational systems around the world, try to identify what works and what doesn't work, and trying to apply this knowledge in other places. So in order to do this, we use standardized testing. Standardized testing is a synonym of fairness. So basically, what we try to do with standardized testing is trying to apply the same administration, the same the same assessment, try to use the same rules for everyone, try to make everyone follow the same standards to be able to compare the result. This doesn't mean that it's the only way to do it. Of course, there are other kind of examinations that are completely needed, and here, as teachers, as most of you are, of course, it's completely important and fundamental, like the classroom assessment. But it's completely different. Here, what we try to see is if we can learn something from other places. What we can learn, what works and what doesn't work internationally. So the best way to do this is through standardized testing, but of course, it's not the only way. It's just one more. What we are trying to provide here is complementary information, trying to give like the whole picture, together with the examinations that all teachers are doing every year in their classrooms. We can have like a more realistic picture about what is happening in the educational system, what is happening in the schools. The interesting concept here is the concept of competency, what we are assessing in the assessment. So basically, science is defined as the ability to engage with science-related issues, with ideas of science as a reflective citizen. So basically, we want to assess if the students, if the 50 years old students around the world can think like a scientist, can really design, can really explain concepts scientifically, if they can think as a scientist. This is why the concept of competence that we define in PISA is intended to assess three main dimensions. One of them is if the students can explain phenomena scientifically, evaluate and design scientific tasks, interpret data and evidence scientifically. Of course, we also assess knowledge. The methodology and procedures in science are important to be able to extrapolate, to generalize this information to the real life situations, and especially to what these students are going to need to do in the future. But it's not the only thing that we pay attention. We also think that it's extremely important to pay attention what are the attitudes of the students through the learning process to science, how the students are working, how the students think, how the students feel, and of course, the context. We always need to pay attention about where the student is studying, if the economic context, the socioeconomic context of the students, the families, the school, is also playing an important role in the performance. So what we try to provide here is like a multidimensional approach, try to see if we can, with all of this information, try to put a little bit more light in what is happening in the schools. Here we have, for example, an item, just to show you a little bit what kind of questions we ask to the students. In this case, we have a task. So we present this picture. As you see, we have two slopes, and what we present to the students is like an experiment. So the students in the experiment are trying to understand why in one of the slopes there are no trees, or there are almost no trees, and in the other slope there are many trees. So the situation is like this. In the experiment, the students are going to take into account three variables. One of them is the solar radiation that there is in one slope and in the other. Also the soil moisture, and at the end the rainfall, if in one of the slopes it rains more or not. So we present this situation, and we ask them to think as a scientist. So basically the first task is that the students will need to establish two instruments to measure, two instruments to measure the solar radiation, soil moisture, and rainfall in its slope. So the main thing, the first task is like we are going to establish two instruments in each slope. So the first question that we are going to ask to the students is why we need two instruments. Any idea? But why two? Exactly. So here the right response is when the student can argue that we are using two just to be sure that, for example, as you mentioned, the measure is accurate. So we can only put one, but if we put two, we make sure that both are giving the same results in case that one of them is going to fail, and basically to ensure the accuracy of the measure. So if we put two in both slopes, this will give the right answer to the student. Within the same task, we are going to ask one a little bit more difficult. In this case, we are going to present like a situation to the student. The situation is like the students that are taking part of this experiment disagree about the reason why in one of the slopes there are more trees than in the other. So one of the students says that the difference is because the solar radiation in one of the slopes is higher than in the other. And the second student says that the reason why there are more trees in one of the slopes is because the difference in rainfall. Which one is right, student one or student two? Yes, very good. Exactly, you need to ask them. I mean, they will need to check that, of course, the average of rainfall is more or less the same. It's, in fact, the same. There are no difference. But, however, the average solar radiation is much higher in the slope B. This is why it makes the slope A more wet. So this is why it explains the answer, and the student one, it will be the right one. So basically, this is the kind of questions that we ask. It's not just to reproduce knowledge. It's not just to try to show that they know, if not how they use that knowledge. If they can provide information to a discussion, if they can really think like a scientist. I invite everyone to go to the website. There are many other questions like this, and everyone can take the items, can take the questions to see what kind of questions we ask. So it's important to realize that what we assess here probably is different to what other assessments around the world are doing, and this is why it makes it different, and this is why it gives also like a different value, like a different approach or a different perspective. One important thing that I would like to mention here before I present some of the highlights, some of the results from the last PISA report, is the sampling. So basically, what we do in each participating country in PISA is select like a random number of schools that they are going to make. This group of schools needs to be representative of the country. So of course, we cannot go to the countries and assess all of schools because it will be super expensive, and in most of the cases, logistically impossible. So what we do is just select a random number of schools within the country, and we make sure that this group of schools are representative of the whole country. So these standards that were developed by external experts in sampling, we established these standards and we asked the countries to follow these standards. So basically, in the case of Argentina, in the last PISA report, once the sampling procedures were presented, it was, the results revealed like the national defined target population was slightly different from the desired target population. So basically what we do is taking into account the whole population of schools and students in the country. We establish what schools were randomly selected to take part of the assessment. Sometimes there are some exclusions of schools and some exclusions of students within schools. But to ensure the comparability, one of the standards that we have is that we need to be sure that the students are covering the whole population of students in the country. So in this case, in the case of Argentina, because some exclusions were performed during the sampling, this means like there is like a significant threat of non-coverage bias. So basically, the standard, what it says is like the PISA-defined target population covers 95% of the total population. So basically, that means that all exclusions between schools and within the schools, and students within the schools cannot exceed the 5%. So basically, this is why the conclusion that the external contractors and the government and the OECD agreed was like the Argentina results may not be representative of the whole country. However, one of the options that the OECD is offering to the countries is if some specific regions wants to have their own results on top of the country results, they can do like an oversampling. In this case, La Ciudad Autónoma de Buenos Aires, Cava, was one of the sub-regions that they wanted to have their own results. In this case, the results from the sampling in Cava were adequate. This is why in the report, and along all the international data sets, Argentina was not included in the data sets. It's presented, the results are presented separately. It doesn't mean that they're useless. The only consideration, if we want to analyze this data or if we want to work with this data, is like this data is not representative of the whole country. But we still have that information, and it can be useful information to work with. On the other hand, Cava, all the sampling procedures and all the standards were acceptable, were adequate, and this is why Cava was fully included in the results, in the international data set and in the report. This is why in the next slides that I'm going to present, in some cases appears Cava, but in most of the cases Argentina, we cannot present the results because we cannot be completely sure that the results are going to be representative. Therefore, we cannot compare directly internationally with other countries. Well, the first dimension, the first concept, I would like to talk today about three concepts: performance, equity, and well-being. Performance. What we know about performance? So basically, across years, PISA started in 2000. It's like evaluation that is performing every 3 years. So we already have like a large data sets, large scale data to analyze what is happening, what are the trends around the world. So one of the interesting things that we see when we analyze who are the high-performing educational systems around the world, that they can maintain their performance across years, like is the case that Singapore, Canada, Finland, or Estonia, they can maintain the performance across year. What we observe is like there are some factors in common between all of these educational systems. Two factors are the main factors that are in common, that all of these high-performing countries have in common. One of them is high and universal expectations for all. Even yesterday in the presentation that Christine had, she showed that expectations, the student expectations, is one of the key factors, is one of the most important things to have in mind when we are working with the students. Basically, as a teachers, we know that the expectations, not only that the expectations that the students have, but also the expectations from the teachers can have like a very positive impact in the students. So there is like a famous psychological experiment or effect that is called the Pygmalion Effect that I guess that most of you know, that if we really have like a high expectations about our students, this is creating like a positive impact in them. And if we are having like a very low expectations about them, we don't think that they have capacity, they cannot do the task, you are going to have like a negative impact in that students, and they are going to perceive that they can do less than what they can really do. The other important factor that all of these high-performing countries have in common is the great teaching for everyone. One of the practices that they are doing is put the best teachers in the schools with the group of students that they are struggling, with the students that they are having more difficulty than others, with the students from disadvantaged socioeconomic background. Students with needs are the students who usually need the attention of the best teachers. Here we can see like the performance of all participating countries. In this case, it's in science. What we can see here is like there is like an important difference between the highest performing countries and the lowest performing countries. There are like a difference of more than 3 schooling years between the highest and the lowest. And this is something that is happening not only in science, but also in reading and also in mathematics. So what we try to provide in this kind of reports is try to provide evidence about what is working, what works, what are making the highest performing countries like to perform high. So basically, we are trying to provide data, to provide evidence. Everyone is, all the data is available, and everyone can analyze this data, can access to the data, and create their own interpretations. So basically, what we try to provide is evidence about why are happening these differences, what works and what doesn't work. So in this case, well, we have the results of CAB Argentina is below the OECD average, but not that far away, specifically in science. In science, it was the performance much, it was closer to the OECD average. But in this case, I don't want to pay attention to what's the exactly location of the countries. What I want to show here is like why there is this important gap. What is happening? What is making the countries on the top being in the top and the countries on the bottom being in the bottom? Another interesting approach is all the competence scales in PISA are divided in 6 proficiency levels. So these 6 proficiency levels are trying to define what are the competencies that the students should have. So basically, in PISA is defined the proficiency level 2 as the minimum level that the students should have to perform well internationally, to have the minimum level that to be able to be competent in an international context. So in this case, the percentage of students below level 2 is also considered as an indicator of equity. In this case, we see in the figure the OECD average together with the results of CABA, Spain, and other countries in the Latin America region, no? Like Chile, Uruguay, Mexico, Colombia, or Brazil. In this case, we see that CABA, in terms of the percentage of students below the level 2, is very similar to the OECD. So in this case, for example, is doing pretty well. Then we have the results of the rest, the distribution of the students in the rest of the proficiency levels. And another interesting thing to pay attention here is the highest levels. So basically, level 5 and 6 are considered the levels of excellence. So basically, each educational system usually provides like a number of students that are excellent to the international context. In this case, it's interesting also to pay attention how many we have, how many each educational system, how many students, excellent students are providing. We can see here like the distribution of all proficiency levels across all participating countries in PISA 2015. As we can see, there is also like a huge variability, like a huge difference between the countries. But we can see here is that the highest performing countries are usually the ones who has the lowest percent of students below level 2. On the other hand, the countries that are in the lowest performing countries are usually the ones who are not providing like the minimum level of the basic education, like the basic level of competency to the students. So this is why we are starting to see that there is like a relation, no, between equity and performance. This is one of the indicators, but it's not the only one. So basically the second dimension, the second component that we make like a special emphasis in the PISA reports is the concept of equity. Equity means inclusive education, means give opportunities to all students, opportunities for everyone. So all students needs to be included in the educational system, needs to be taken into account. So basically we need to be fair. We need to be able to provide like a fair treatment to everyone, regardless of gender, regardless of socioeconomic background. It doesn't matter if they are immigrants or non-immigrants. Everyone should have access to the same opportunities, access to education, access to reach the highest levels of performance. What we see here is like, in fact, the relation between equity and performance is pretty high. And the optimistic, the most interesting thing that we can learn from here is like, of course, everyone wants to be in the green area. So basically we have the relation between equity and performance. And what we can see here, the lesson that we can learn from here, is that the highest performing countries in PISA are also the ones more equitable. So we have the case of Macau, China, Hong Kong, Finland, Estonia. All of these countries are not only performing high, if not that they are also the more equitable. This means that equity and excellence can go together. Here we have also like some specific examples of performance. So some people usually say that all the differences are just because culture difference. However, what we observe across the years is like if we compare, for example, the last time that science was the main domain in PISA, it was in 2006, and we compare the results, the trends from 2006 until 2015, we see that there are several countries that they are doing well. They are changing things. In a period of 9-10 years, they can improve the performance. We have the example of Colombia, Romania, Norway, Portugal. They could improve their performance in science since 2006. We also have like a very interesting examples of equity improve. So we also see that across all of this period, during this period, we have examples of equity. We have examples of many countries that could improve equity, like Brazil, Mexico, Thailand, Montenegro, United States, Bulgaria, Chile. They could improve since 2006 the influence that the socioeconomic background of the students and the socioeconomic background of the schools are having in the learning process, in the performance. So they are reducing this effect. They are basically making their educational system more equitable. They are reducing the gap between the students that are coming from an advanced socioeconomic background and from a disadvantaged socioeconomic background. Here we have, for example, information, data about immigrants. What we can see here, that is something that is happening across all participating countries, or well, across most of participating countries in PISA, is like non-immigrant students are performing much higher than immigrant students. This is something that is happening in most of the cases, as you can see. The dark blue are the performance of the non-immigrant students, and the light blue is the performance of the first generation of immigrants. So basically what we can see here is like this is the trend, but this is not the only way to do it. We have, for example, the case of Singapore, that the first generation of immigrants and the second generation of immigrants are in fact performing much better than non-immigrant students. We can also see the example of Canada, where immigrants, first generation of immigrants, second generation of immigrants, and non-immigrant students are performing exactly the same. That means that it's possible. Another interesting concept is the percentage of resilient students. Resilient students are defined in PISA as we define that resilient students are those students that are coming from the bottom 25% of students from the lowest socioeconomic background. They are, however, performing at the top 25% of students across all participating countries and economies in PISA 2015. So this is the example that we have many countries that they are really making an effort to give opportunities to the students who are coming from a poor context, from a disadvantaged context, to perform as the students that are coming from the highest levels. In this case, even we have examples of countries that during this period from 2006 until 2015, they could improve also the percentage of resilient students. This is the case, for example, of the United States and Spain. Both countries have increased in more than 10% the number of resilient students in this 10-year period. Another interesting thing to pay attention in terms of equity is grade repetition. Someone could expect that grade repetition, who are grade repeaters? So the first response probably will be low-performing students. However, we see in this data that not always is the case. The difference that we have between the yellow points and the blue bars are the effect of the socioeconomic background. It's the effect of the performance. So basically, what we have here is like, of course, lower performance students have like a higher probability to repeat a grade. However, even when we take into account, after taking into account the performance in reading and science, students from a disadvantaged socioeconomic background are more likely to repeat a grade than the students from an advanced socioeconomic background. This is the case, for example, of places like Spain or even Cuba or Vietnam, that students who are coming from a disadvantaged background, they have even 4 times more likely to repeat a grade, even when their performance is the same in reading and science. So this is how the socioeconomic impact, the disparities, can impact also the grade repetition, and how the grade repetition is used. The third component, well-being. This is one of the main innovations in the last PISA report. So we care, and of course it's important to pay attention to math, reading, and science, to cognitive skills. But what we also see is that it's not the only thing. As we also see in different presentations along this conference, like the one that Richard Gilby gave yesterday, how happy are the students is something that could impact the performance, could make things work better or work worse. So here we try to assess well-being from a multidimensional perspective. So we want to pay attention to the psychological perspective, how students really feel. They feel satisfied with their lives, they really feel that they are doing well, but also the physical component is, are the students really healthy? Are the students playing sports? And of course, we also pay attention to the cognitive skills and the social skills. So the important here, one more time, is to try to draw the whole picture, try to take into account the whole dimensions that could play like an important role in the performance. So here we have some results. One of the most interesting ones is life satisfaction. We ask the students to rate from 1 to 10 how satisfied they feel with their lives. And we try to see and we see the distribution, that there is like a huge difference about how satisfied are the students with their lives. And maybe surprisingly for many people, it's like we have like a very high performing countries, like China or Korea, that they are examples usually of very high performing countries. However, they are the less satisfied students between all the participating countries in PISA. So the question here is, that means that in order to be like a high performing country, you really need to have students that they are not satisfied, like unhappy students. So it means like excellence means unhappy students. So what we can see with this example, with this data, is that it's not the only way. We also have very high performing countries, like in the case of Netherlands, Switzerland, Estonia, that they are high performing countries, and at the same time, these educational systems are the ones who have the more satisfied students across all participating countries in PISA. So there is a different way, there is other alternatives to do things. We also see that life satisfaction could have like an important impact, is correlated with several dimensions, with several variables that are very important in education, like achievement motivation, sense of belonging, physical activity, teaching support, parental support. Life satisfaction is connected with most of the things, most of the variables that are important in education. On the other hand, we have like when students are not satisfied, we observe that there is also like a high correlation between the students who are not satisfied and factors like anxiety, bullying, extreme internet use. So this is why it's important to pay attention to well-being. This is why it's important to pay attention also how the students feel. Here we have, as the former slide suggests, that there is also like a relation between life satisfaction and performance. So it's something that life satisfaction, happiness, performance can go together. So here, again, we have that everyone would like to be in the green area. The green area are the countries that are performing very well, but they are also doing very well in life satisfaction, like the case of Finland, the Netherlands, or Estonia. Now I would like to ask you a question. As an expert in education that you work every day with the students, what do you think is the difference in life satisfaction within boys and girls? Please, hands up who thinks that boys are more satisfied than girls across most of the countries. Okay, and girls? Who thinks that girls usually are more satisfied? Well, as I can see, maybe there is like a little bias because most of the audience are women. So I am happy to discover that at least the people who are here are very satisfied and they are projecting their expectations. That's very good. However, the results are showing exactly the opposite. What we can see is that across all participating countries, boys are more satisfied than girls. And even if we look in some countries on the right, we can discover that even countries that usually are examples of performance, examples of equity, like Finland. However, we can also see that in countries like Finland, boys are much more satisfied than girls. So even in countries like this, there is always like a room for improvement. What we can see here, what we can see here is the students' expectations. As we mentioned before, and other speakers mentioned during this conference, expectations are very important, and expectations are also correlated with how much the students enjoy with learning. No? So what we can see here is the percentage between the students who expect to have like a scientific career. What's the relation with how much they enjoy working? So what we have here is like a very interesting conclusion, very interesting information, that if the students reported in the assessment that they really enjoy with science, not only they are going to have like a higher expectations about their careers, if not also they are going to perform much better. This is why paying attention to these kind of variables is also very, very important. Here we have the student enjoyment of science and science performance. So basically what we can see is like across all participating countries in PISA, the students who enjoy more are the students who usually performs better. Teacher support and anxiety. I will put the ball again in your field. So here we have four practices. Four practices that how the teachers give support. As we also heard from other presentations like about feedback, like not all feedback is positive. You can also provide like a negative feedback. So the important thing is to analyze how we are going to give support, how we are going to give feedback. And here, the support from the teachers can be very positive or can be very negative. So here, for example, we have four practices. What do you think between all of these four practices is going to have like the most positive impact, and which one is going to have the less positive impact, like a negative impact? It's going to increase the anxiety of the students. So we have the teachers adapt the lessons to my class. The teacher provides individual help when a student has difficulties understanding a topic or task. Teachers grade me harder than they grade other students. Teachers gave me the impression that they think I am less smart than I really am. So between all of these four, 1, 2, 3, 4, which one do you think is increasing the anxiety of the students? That's correct. So I am glad that at least the students, the group of students that you have in your classroom probably are going to have like lower levels of anxiety. So basically, it's important, of course, to try to adapt lessons. It's important to give individual support, personalization. But we also need to have into account that sometimes, even when we try to help, when we try to give positive support, we are making just the opposite. We are increasing the probability that the student is going to have more anxiety levels. So it's not only giving support, it's giving support thinking in what works best and what doesn't work. Another important variable when we talk about well-being, and that is related to many other variables in education, is that sense of belonging. When we are working in schools, we realize that one important component, and I am completely sure that most of you already see this in your own schools, that when the students have like a sense of belonging, they really believe that they are part of the school, part of the learning process. They are engaged, they are motivated, they even have like a more self-efficacy. They have the perfect scenario to perform better. And this is what we see across all OECD countries, even, participating countries in PISA, not only OECD countries. So even after accounting by the socioeconomic background, the sense of belonging is having like a positive impact. And what we can see here is like the teacher support is playing like a very important role. If the teachers giving support, the adequate support, the students are going to increase their sense of belonging. And therefore, we are going also to increase the motivation, self-efficacy, the engagement with the learning process. So this is why it's so important to have the teachers, or to provide information, to give resources to teachers to give the adequate support. Because, of course, all of you are playing like a very important role in education. Well, here we have the case of CABA, that is also having like the support that teachers in CABA are giving is also like a very positive. It's one of the most positive impacts in a student's sense of belonging. Bullying. This is one of the dramas that we have in many schools around the world. So what we see is that the OECD average, almost 20% of the students say that they were bullied before. So and between all the options that we have, well, one interesting comment that I want to mention here is that the concept of bullying in PISA is paying attention also to the psychological dimension. So it's important to have into account that bullying is not only when the students have like a physical aggression. Sometimes the psychological aggression can be even more difficult to solve than the physical aggression. So this is why we ask the students about these kind of things, like other students made fun of me, other students spread out rumors about me. So these reasons are the reasons that the students are reporting as the most frequent in schools. So how we can help, how we can solve this? We can see that across all participating countries, we have like important differences. There are some educational systems that they are doing very well and they are reducing the exposure of bullying in their students. But we also have many cases that they are increasing their exposure. So why there are these differences? What works? What is working? Why in the countries that, they are performing, they are reducing the exposure of bullying in the students, what they are doing? One of the things that we see is like an important thing is disciplinary climate. So what we can see is like the countries, in the countries where the students and the schools have like a worse disciplinary climate, is increasing dramatically the exposure of bullying of that students. Even after accounted by the socioeconomic background, even when we have students with the same socioeconomic background, when the classroom or the school have like a good disciplinary climate, is reducing the exposure of bullying. On the other hand, when the classroom or the school have like a worse disciplinary climate, is increasing the exposure of bullying of that students. Here we have again the role of the teachers. When the students perceive that the teachers are not fair, it's also increasing the exposure to bullying. So this is why communication is very important. And one more time, feedback is very important. Just show why. Sometimes we apply, sometimes I want to believe that, of course, it's not intentional. It's just probably like a lack of communication. Sometimes probably it's just because we didn't explain properly the criteria before doing an assessment, and we gave the feedback, as James mentioned yesterday. So, and you can perceive that this is unfair. Why? I am score like the lowest if the criteria was not explained properly. So we have a lot to work in this direction. And what we can see is that if you can work with the students and they perceive that what we are doing in the classroom or in the school is fair, I am not treated differently, I am not treated in a special way, I am not graded harder, the exposure to bullying is going to be lower. Even after accounting by the, one more time, by the socioeconomic background of the students and the school. Parental support. Of course, parents, they also play like a very important role here. We have again the list of most frequent reasons why the students feel that they were bullied. The students, the other colleagues make fun of me or spread out like rumors. So what we can see is like how the parents are giving support is also creating like a difference. What we can see here is like when the parents do not help the students, when they are feeling this, they are ignoring the problem that sometimes happen. Sometimes when we don't want to see the problem, I mean, we don't see the problem, it seems like it doesn't exist. But if we really help, if we really give support, it's making a difference. When we don't help, we are increasing the probability that this kid is going to be bullied again. Well, I hope that all of this data, that I am aware that is a lot of information, is a lot of data, I just wanted to base our message, base our evidence in data. Now, to the last part of the presentation, I would like to focus in a more, enter into the discussion, enter into what it makes everyone feel outside of the comfort zone. So basically, it's try to understand what PISA is doing, what kind of information PISA is providing. So I would like to go through 6 or 7 myths that usually are associated with PISA and how data can make this, can show that this is a myth and it's not reality. One of them, I guess that many people think that top-performing countries do well because they don't include all of their students. What is happening, in fact, is that the share of 15 years old covered by PISA is 89% internationally. See, we are covering almost 90% of all students that are in schools, all 15 years students in the schools. Another interesting thing that many people use as an argument to criticize PISA, and of course all criticisms are very, are welcome because it's the best way to improve. And this is why we always invite everyone to join, because we can work together to improve things. This is the effort of many people involved. It's not just one organization trying to change things. It's involving everyone to make things different. And one of the things is like many people think that it's all about culture. How many people in this room probably think before, what we can learn from PISA, what we can learn from Singapore? Singapore is a country very, very far away. It's a country that they don't speak my language. I don't know even how they look, how they interact. It's something that I never been with someone from Singapore. However, what we can see is like there are ways, what this data shows is like there is examples of improvement. What it is giving is like the change is possible, and it's not all about culture. In fact, it's about what we do with the students, what the teachers do with the students, what the school principals do with the schools, what the policy makers are doing with the educational systems. So, and we have specific examples of countries that in 10 years, they could improve things. And it's not only in Asia. We have cases in Europa. We have cases in Latin America. Colombia has improved since 2006 until 2015 their performance in science. It's not all about culture. It's not all about something that is far away from us. What we are doing, what they are doing, is something that maybe can be applied here. It's what the human being is doing rather than something external. So what this data is suggesting is like the responsibility is on us rather than on external factor, cultural, that we cannot change. We can learn, we can see, we can learn from practices that other countries are doing to make things better. The world is divided between rich and well-educated nations and poor and badly educated ones. So this is also one of the arguments that usually some people think that after all, what we can do, there are rich and there are poor, and there is nothing to change. It's something that we cannot modify. So let's keep living with that. However, what we can see is like based in all the layered scale, all the macro data that we have, it's like less than a quarter of the performance is explained by GDP. So basically, less than a quarter. It means that 75, even more than 75 of the performance is not explained by how wealthy is the country. So it's how people are doing things different. So it's not only about rich and poor, it's what the people are doing. Of course, how wealthy is the country is playing a role. The socioeconomic background is playing a role. But all of this data, what it's showing is like there is another way to use the resources. Even when you are not the highest, the most rich country in the world, is how you are using the resources. In fact, one of the interesting results that we also see in PISA is like the countries, the educational systems that they spend more in education are not the educational systems that are performing the best. This is the case, for example, of Luxembourg. It's like a very, very little country in the middle of Europe. Very rich. So they are spending, this is the country that is spending more in education. However, it's not between the highest performing countries. What we see is like the investment in education has like a relatively high correlation when it's very low. So you need to invest a minimum. But most of after that, the relation is zero. There is no relation. The fact that you are investing more money, more resources, it doesn't mean that you are going to perform better. This is why some countries in Asia are with less resources, with less money, with less investment, they are getting better results. Therefore, the preparation is destiny. Is poverty the destiny? So it's something that we cannot change. As we see before, there are examples. And for example, we have in 2015, the example of Vietnam. We have that the 10% most disadvantaged students in Vietnam are in fact performing around the OECD average. So it's possible. It's not the only way. We can change things. Of course, it takes time. It's difficult. It's going to take time, and it's going to need to have everyone involved. But the important thing is like we have examples that make it possible. Excellence is not compatible with equity. This is something that we already saw at the beginning of the presentation. So basically, we have examples that both things can go together. Many educational systems, many schools, many people think that the way to get excellence is just divide people, is just make groups, just do like an early tracking, is just separate. Let's identify who are the good ones, and they are going to invest the best resources in those students. However, what we are seeing is like, it's just the opposite. It's when we pay attention to all participating countries, the highest performing countries are the countries that they are doing better in equity. So it seems what this data suggests is that in order to reach excellence, it's important to reduce the gaps. It's important to reduce, to increase the equity. Excellence requires selection. This is also very related to the previous one. So it means that we need to make groups, we need to divide groups, We need to make schools like a very elite schools and very bad schools. We need to divide within the schools, like classrooms that are performing very well and classrooms that are performing very bad in order to reach excellence. What we can see is the highest performing education system are actually non-selective, providing similar opportunities to all the students. Educational quality and personalization is all about class size. As you know, one of the discussions one of the hot topics in education is about class size. It's better to have small groups, big groups. However, what we can see, what this data suggests, is like rather than paying all the attention to the class side, the highest performing educational system, what they are paying attention is to the quality of teaching. Is how good are the teachers, and specifically, the highest performing educational system in PISA are the ones who are who send the best teachers to the students with more difficulties. So they identify, in the highest performing countries, this is one of the factors in common, they identify who are the best teachers, who are the ones who are really engaged with education. They want to improve things, and they make these teachers work with the students who have more difficulties, students with needs, students with from a poor socioeconomic background. And this is what it makes things improve in these countries. So basically, this is giving the responsibility and the power to change things. So teachers here are going to have probably one of the most important roles to improve things. I would like, before I finish, to mention few more things that are coming. One of these is collaborative problem solving. So basically, this year, one of the competencies that we included in the PISA 2015 reports are the collaborative problem solving. The collaborative problem solving, what it's trying to assess is how the students work together, how the students can really discuss and argue with other students in order to reach the objective. So the report is going to be published in the following months, and you can access through the website. Another interesting concept that is going to be introduced in the next round of PISA is the concept of global competence. So in PISA 2018, that the evaluation is going to be performed next year, and the reports are coming in 2019, what is going to be assessed is how students are prepared to work in an international context, from a global perspective. So here, the global competence is going to pay special attention to 3 dimensions. One of them is going to be knowledge and understanding. What is the knowledge and understanding of the students? But the dimension, and the second dimension is going to be the skills. What are the skills of the students? Here is going to be especially important, the socio-emotional skills. How well are prepared the students to discuss, to accept a criticism, to really work in international context where the cultures are different, the ways of interaction are different, the customs are different. And the third component is only the attitudes. How the students perceive themselves to work in international context and to propose and agree in a group, no? And the third thing that I would like to introduce, that in fact is the project that I am working right now, especially close, is the PISA-based test for schools. The OECD in 2012 introduced a new project based on PISA. This project is intended to extend the evidence in PISA to individual schools. So basically what is offered in PISA-based test for schools is similar information as the information that we saw here today, and we include in the reports, but at the school level. So what we do is we go to the school, we test the school, and we send a specific individual information about this school, about how this school compares internationally, how this school can improve things, what are the areas of improvement, what they can do better, what they are doing good, and what they can do better. and basically trying to include practices and help them to improve. So also one of the ideas here is trying to learn from other schools with similar situation. What is doing another schools in Cava but in another area of Cava? What is doing another school in another city? What is doing a school in Cordoba? What is doing a school in Chile? What is doing a school in Colombia? And try to be in contact, trying to learn from them about how to improve things, create like a network of schools around the world. Tomorrow morning at 11, if I am not mistaken, I will be talking about more specifically about PISA for schools, what kind of information we provide and how it works. But at least at this point, just to mention that it's something available, that the schools can, in fact, receive individual information about their schools based on the PISA International Assessment. I invite everyone to go to the website, go to the publications, go to the data. One more time, this is not something that is coming from a country far away from you. So we want you to be involved. We want you to go to the data. We want you to read the reports. We want you to improve things. This is only possible if everyone together are working in the same direction. So thank you very much for your attention. And have a good day.